truth is rejected because it requires change. Now, it's been in the news about the SAVE Act, as they call it, and it's dealing with voting. And I know a lot of people do vote, but a lot of people choose not to vote. And there are many reasons why, and a lot of them I can understand, because as W.E. Du Bois said before, it's only one evil. You got two parties, both of them evil, so it don't really matter which one you vote for, you still voting for evil. So he chose not to vote. And it's more to it than that, and if you read some of W.E.B. Du Bois' writings, you'll see what he was saying and why the United States forced him out of the country. Let's talk about the SAVE Act. And just keep in mind that the percentage of people who illegally vote is like 0.0001%. Let's look at the total population of the United States, and let's look at the 2024 election. Now in 2024, the total population of the United States was, exactly from the census, 340,110,988 people. 340 million people. Let's just average it out, okay? Now, in 2024, they estimated that there were between 11 and 14 million illegal people in the country, right? Now for my statistics, I'm gonna use the higher number. I'm gonna say it was 14 million people, all right? But there are no states in the United States where you can go vote and don't have to show some form of ID, a driver license, social security card, something. It might not even be a photo ID, but you gotta show some ID to vote. Okay, so back to the illusory truth effect, people having the tendency to believe false information to be correct after people can repeat it over and over again, and they're repeating the false statement that illegal people are trying to vote. Let me break it down to you. Now, if you're going with what I was saying before about the 340 million people, right? And you subtract the 14 million from that 340 million, 110, right? 988. That's gonna leave you with 326, 110, 988 million people. We just gonna say 326 million people just to keep it easy, right? Okay, now out of those 326 million people, 54 million people were ineligible to vote because they under the age of 18 or they had felonies. You know what I mean? They legal, they're Americans, but they can't vote because you got to be over 18 to vote, right? Let's keep it real. In 2024, right, you had 271,893,951 people above the age of 18, right, that could have been registered to vote. Now, in 2024, there were exactly 173.8 million people actually registered to vote. Okay, so out of that 271 million, 173.8 was actually registered to vote, right? That's in 2024, because that's when most of the people come out. We have what they call a off-year election coming up because the president's not running, so not as many people have a tendency not to come out and vote for the Senate and the House. Now in South Carolina, we'll probably have more people coming out to vote, due to the governor race. But if it wasn't for that, most people would stay home because they really don't I don't know why, they care about the presidential election. But anyway, that's the facts. That's how it is. All right. Now, out of that 173.8 million, right, 152 million, or 152,312,802, to be specific, right? 152 million people voted. That's it. Right? Now, 77 million voted for President Trump. 75 million voted for Vice President Kamala Harris. Right? That's how it went. In 2024, there were 152 million people that voted, roughly, on average, right? Now, 77 million voted for President Trump. 75 million voted for Vice President Harris, okay? And 3 million voted for the third-party write-in candidates, okay? So, that's the amount, that comes up to the 152 million people and some change. You know, I'm just averaging here. But if you want to know more, you know, I got the links in the description and you can go check that information out for yourself, you know, if you want the exact numbers. The numbers show that 18 million people, 18 million registered voters, right, out of the 171, they chose not to vote at all, period, right? So they could have swayed because the election was, you know, 75, 77. So them 18 million people could have swayed it one way or the other, depending on who they would have voted for. But they chose not to vote, right? And then the numbers show that 98 million people chose not to even register to vote. They was eligible. Remember I said it was 271. That was eligible, right? But only 170 some registered to vote. So you got a whole 98 million people that didn't even register. They said the hell with it, period, you know, along with the 18, right? But when you add them up, you got 116 million Americans who could have voted, but they chose not to vote. Because the wealthy who maintain power, it's not in their interest for everybody to get out and vote. Why? Because most people who really actually work for a living, you know, you use your hands, you go out there and sweat, you know, or you sit in the office and you doing what you can on the computer to come up for other people that's billionaires, you know, you have a different mindset than the wealthy who are manipulating you. The basics of the education system does not encourage you to vote, right? The system encourages you to be a worker. And these numbers tell the story. The wealthy don't want you to vote unless they can manipulate the turnout. And that's what the SAVE Act is about. You know, in the last 10 years, it's only been 0.0001% of people who tried to vote illegally. Because if think about what I'm saying, hell, you had 116 million people that didn't even vote at all, who could have voted. So it really, you know, as always, the Congress and the wealthy people are making an issue where there is not an issue. They're not encouraging more people to vote, because when you encourage more people to vote, then they might not be voting for you. So we got to make it limited, because you got to remember in the past, you know, women could not vote. Even now, women make up around 50% of all registered voters. before they could not even vote. People don't think about that when they think about the Equal Rights Amendment, because the media manipulates you to think that it helped only black people. No, it helped women too. All people, it helped a lot of people just be able to vote, because before that, black people couldn't vote either. Right? I mean, that's what the voting amendment was for, so that black people and women could have the right to vote. But anyway, let's go beyond that, because they educate you in school not to vote, because they don't tell you about how to go about and why it's important to vote. They teach you about how to be a worker, so that the wealthy can manipulate you to make money for them. But let's move on. Now, why would the wealthy people not want you to vote? Why wouldn't they want you to vote? Well, they wouldn't want you to vote because they can't manipulate you if you're in control of the situation. The less people that vote means that a small minority are controlling the way that the government operates. Now, I put plenty of videos online on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, detailing how the money is being spent. This is what I've done. But because of the illusory truth effect, you're not getting the fact that the people in the government, wealthy people, all of them are wealthy if they're on the federal level. You can believe that. But you don't have to believe me. Check the links in the description. Check my videos and you'll show how many billions and trillions of dollars are being spent, not on the American people, but people overseas. How many billions are being given away to the billionaires who already have billions of dollars. But we give it to them. Why? So that our politicians can even be wealthier. So keep that in mind. Look at my videos. Keep that in mind. Look at my videos and let's move forward to try to overturn this situation. It's called economic reparations. Because truth is rejected because it requires change. Truth is rejected because it requires change.